Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here, back in data about Witch Watch episode number 5. This episode is titled, My Student is My Favorite Fan Artist, My Tummy is Tender Today, and Cat Scout. And this is a little weird because, of course, in most Witch Watch episodes, we get the next episode preview. And I don't know if they were just, playing with us or just, not telling us the correct information last chapter, or not in last chapter, in last episode, I should say. I need to remember, this is a anime episode review, not a manga chapter review. And yes, I know I do way more manga chapter reviews than anime episode reviews, but I gotta have my terminology right whenever I'm talking about one of these things or the other, if you know what I'm saying, right? But last time on Witch Watch episode 4, we got a next episode preview where we got three parts of the episode, and they were titled Nico's Betrayal, Conchi's Growing Fable, and Morito's Raging Iron Fist. And apparently none of those were true. I should have picked up on that for the fact of hey, none of the next few Witch Watch chapters in the manga, which would have been the next up to be animated, were actually any of those chapter titles, so it's a little bit of a weird thing there, but honestly, they do a little bit of a weird thing in this episode of Witch Watch. So of course, if you guys don't know what Witch Watch is, I don't know why you're watching this video, but hey, if you are, go check out this really awesome anime going on here in the spring of 2025 season. But of course, this is Witch Watch episode 5. Of course, the original manga is by Kento Shinohara, and this, of course, the anime production is done by Bilberry Animation Studios. And this episode covers chapters 13 through 15 of the manga, which is a little bit interesting for the main fact of, last episode covered chapters 9 through 11, so what happened to chapter 12? Well, I don't know if they're just getting ready to put it in a different place than, of course, what we will be getting. Of course, hey, it obviously got skipped here, so it may be, first up next episode or something, because, of course, next episode is, I'm just going to say it now, it is starting the little bit of an arc called Under the Lover's Tree, which is one of my favorite parts of the early Witch Watch manga, but it is only a 2-chapter arc, so I could also see, them throwing in, being that it is, a comedy romance chapter between, hey, here's Nico and here's Morito. I could see them, doing a little bit of things in there along with the Under the Lover's Tree arc, being that they normally cover about 3 chapters per episode, but I honestly don't really know. But honestly, this chapter, or this episode of Witch Watch is very, very good, because it just goes through chapters 13 all the way through 15, and just covers literally everything in them, which is hey, it is a manga reader's dream, and I also guess a anime fan who wants a really, really good adaptation's dream. But honestly, I just want to sit down and talk about this episode, do all of the regular stuff of it, so hey, I think that's what we're going to start off in doing. Of course, the first section of this episode is titled, My Student is My Favorite Fan Artist. And this part of the episode is really all about the homeroom teacher of Nico's class, Mrs. Makura, or Mrs. Makua, right? And pretty much the student, of course, one of Nico's friends, named Kuku Ureshino, right? And pretty much the episode opens with Nico looking at some of Ureshino's fan art, and she's like, whoa, this is some really good stuff, and you said this is about this manga called Uran Mirage. This is really, really cool. And of course, we have Mrs. Makua come in this sort of moment and just be like, wow, that's really cool that she's an artist. Man, I also really love the manga series Uran Mirage, but I will never tell anybody, pretty much. And it's a bunch of comedy stuff where she's like, oh, she's a fan artist, and especially a fan artist of these two characters, Oboro and Utsuo. Wow, that's actually crazy. That's so cool. I almost have seen almost every single one of those. And of course, Nico and all of her friends are talking in the back of the room, and it's oh wow, she has a lot of followers. Oh, and eventually Miss Makua ends up seeing the art and is like, wait a second, Ureshino is my favorite fan artist named Hami, pretty much, and we pretty much just learn what their social media handles names are also. Miss Makua's is Dinky Melon, or Dingeki Melon, and of course Ureshino's is Hami at Slightly Out of Reach. So, hey, some pretty interesting character building arc stuff there, pretty much, right? We didn't get the opening theme of the episode, of course, Watch Me by Yoasobi, just pure joy every time I watch it, pretty much. But as we cut back into the episode, it's more of just hey, we learned that Miss Makua was one of Hami's first followers, pretty much, and she really gives a long-winded explanation of why the art that, of course, Ureshino or Hami makes, why she really enjoys it so much. So she's just going through all of this, wow, there's got all of these, different, aspects to it, and really being one of those fans that sort of breaks down everything is it was a totally deliberate thing, when in reality it may have not been, if you know what I'm saying. I'm sure we all know somebody like that, who knows. you may look at my YouTube channel and be like, man, whenever this guy talks about Kagurabachi or Witch Watch or whatever, man, he really goes into depth. And I don't think Kidoshi Nahara was thinking this far into the future whenever they were writing this or whatever, right? And eventually we see that she's going on this long-winded explanation, and she's in the teacher's office, and what she does is she just like, man, Ureshino is so cool, but she says that part out loud, and of course, who else would be standing there but Ureshino? We see that she has sort of come over to hand out a dental flyer that like, hey, for the student council and club and like activities and all that various stuff, she has this flyer, and we see that it has the character of Utsuro pretty much holding a toothbrush like a sword position on it, right? And this really makes Miss Bakura act like really nervous here in a moment, like, oh, what about all this, right? And she even like calls it very good art, and she even like, hey, Ureshino, do you like manga? And Ureshino's like, oh my gosh, I love it so very much, right? And she's like, I love Uran Mirage, I'm what you would call an otaku, like really putting her feelings out there. And eventually Ureshino's like, hey, Miss Makua, do you like anime and manga? And she's just like, no, I don't at all. But Ureshino's like, hey, didn't you make some reference in a class? She's like, okay, maybe I do a little bit, right? And of course, then Ureshino points to her desk like, oh, are those the first few volumes of Uran Mirage on your desk? And she's like, oh, I was borrowing those from a friend, right? And eventually she's just like, oh, do you know about this manga? And Ureshino just like goes gushing on about it. Of course, we know that she is a fan fiction artist of it, so of course she knows plenty about it, right? And eventually, as all of this happens, Ureshino then just like holds out her hands, and inside of her hands is a limited edition acrylic keychain, one that you could really only get in an Uran Mirage event. And she says like, hey, Miss Makua, I saw you drop this in the halls earlier, right? And Miss Makua's like, oh, whoa, no, what are you talking about, right? And she's pretty much like, hey, please don't hide your feelings about Uran Mirage. I really just want to talk about it with you. And Miss Makua's like, you know what? I would love to talk about it with you too, Hami, or Ureshino, whatever name she's calling her. It's just a really nice part of the episode, like just going through and like just seeing all this. Of course, there's a lot of gag aspects of all of this, like Miss Makura is so nervous that she doesn't want anybody to know she's an otaku and all this other various stuff. Then it's just like, hey, at the end of the day, why hide it? It's just a good thing to let you be yourself and put all of your feelings out there into the world. It was just a really good part of the episode, right? Well, it's at this part where we get the episode break, and pretty much what the little image we see during the episode break is like, hey, here's just like the Uran Mirage characters that we've heard of so far, and like here's all of their like character relationships, right? It's something you'd often see in like an anime or manga, like, hey, these two characters know each other, there's a line point between them, oh, they're rivals, right? And like, oh, some of these other guys, there's a guy with a lion mask, that's really weird, but all this various stuff, right? But that's the first break of the episode, right? And whenever we cut back from this break, we're in the second part of the episode, which is titled, My Tummy is Tender Today. As we see, of course, the members of the Otogi household, of course, as we learned last time, it's, hey, Morito and Nico, and also Kanshi's a part of all of this now, right? As we see, they're sitting outside on a park bench, and there's just a guy out here who's just like, hey, I really need help. I need you to cast a spell on me that'll let me turn invisible and almost disappear into the background, right? And pretty much Nico just explains like, hey, this guy is very self-conscious about needing to go use the bathroom, so during class he wants a spell that'll just let him be able to go and do it pretty much, right? We learned this guy's name is Kawashi Hara, right? And we pretty much learned like, hey, in the past he got a little bullied for all of this various stuff, and it's like, hey, because he got bullied and all of this other various stuff, he doesn't really feel too good about going to the bathroom, and that's why he wants this spell to go and pretty much help him out, right? Pretty much, we didn't see that Morito's talking like, hey, dude, you don't need Nico to help you with a spell for any of this, and he sort of like goes on a bit of a long-winded thing about like, hey, just be yourself and just be okay with like, if you were able to come to a witch for advice, and he eventually says like, oh, witch, and he's like, yeah, how are we going to solve this problem anyways? He's almost forgotten that Nico is there. As all of a sudden, Nico, like, uncrosses her arms here in this moment, as we'll learn is the activation for the spell, and just like, boo! And everybody's like, whoa, Nico, you're here, I thought you disappeared, right? As we see that Nico casts the Mobilate spell. I think that's how you say it. It's, it's like the beginning of mobile, Mobiliviat. Mobilate, I don't really know how to say that, and I'm going to admit it fully right here and right now, right? But she goes and pretty much casts this spell, and the whole idea is like, oh, hey, pretty much how you do it is as long as you point your two pointer fingers up, and then you cross your arms, pretty much having your left hand touch your right shoulder, or your right finger, pretty much have your arms crossed, pretty much with your fingers up. This spell is pretty much like going, and as long as you have your arms in the next pattern, hey, you're pretty much invisible to everybody, right? We then cut to everybody's fifth period classes. Of course, this guy, Kawashihara, is in Nico Kanchi, or I don't think Kanchi's in this class. I think it's just the Nico, Morito, and this guy's class, pretty much, right? But he pretty much goes, crosses his arms, and he's like, okay, I gotta go use the bathroom, right? And he does it, and he's like, oh, wait a second. How am I supposed to know if people can see me or not, right? But he eventually, gets up, starts heading towards the door, and he sort of makes it out after realizing, oh no, how am I going to open a door? He pretty much just, bends down and, scoots it over with one of his outraged fingers, pretty much, right? But as he gets out into the hall, oh no, the gym teacher's here, and it's pretty much explained, hey, this gym teacher, I didn't write his name down because I didn't feel like it was important, we pretty much learned, hey, he's got a very keen sense of smell, and it looks like he's about to find out Kawashi. But who would come in to help today but Morito, who's also had the spell cast on him, pretty much, and he's making a little bit of noise, making the gym teacher walk over by him, right? We eventually then go over and see that, hey, Kawashi made it to the bathroom, and he's getting ready to drop his pants. But wait a second. How's he supposed to drop his pants if he can't undo his arms? And if he undoes his arms, everybody will know that he's no longer in the classroom. So what is he going to do? Luckily enough for him, the bell rings in this moment, and he's like, okay, I can do this then, right? Goes and drops trowel in the moment. And as he sort of sits down on the toilet, a few guys come into the classroom, and these were the guys that bullied Kawashi when he was much, much younger. And pretty much we see that all of them are just like, oh, hey, somebody's in the bathroom. Well, no need to get in a fuss about it, pretty much, and they do their thing. Kawashi ends up using the bathroom pretty easy and all of that, right? And we then see at the end of the school day, he went outside and he's like, hey, Nico, thank you for casting that spell on me, but I sort of learned I don't need to be embarrassed at all when it comes to using the bathroom like that, right? It's like, hey, at the end of the day, we made a really, really good message out of this, right? But then Nico's school bag starts to glow a little bit, right? As there's this nice whitish blue light that sort of appears out of the bag. As Kawashi's like, oh, what is that? And also Morito and Kon are a little confused also. And Nico pretty much explains oh, hey, this is just my magic stone. Hey, whenever a witch becomes a witch, we all get one of these. And it starts off blue, and as we become more of a witch, it eventually turns white. And whenever it does turn white, that's when we know that we have been a full-fledged witch, pretty much, right? And she pretty much explains hey, just this little deed of helping you go to the bathroom has helped me grow as a witch just a little bit. And it honestly, it's just a really, really nice note, right? But of course, before we can end off on this segment, we see somebody is standing outside looking in the window of the classroom in a tree. And we see that just this girl is standing there. As we then get the second episode break, of course, during this break, we just get a little bit of a detail hey, this is Nico's wand, here's everything going on here, right? But once we cut back from this break, we get into the third part of the episode, again, which is titled Cat Scout, right? As we pretty much cut outside after the school day, as of course, Kon, Morito, and Nico are all walking home, and one of the various teachers comes over named Mr. Seki, and he just says hey, excuse me, Morito, can I help you, can you help me move my car? There's a cat hiding under it, right? Morito goes over, picks up the car with two arms and sets it down, and the cat pretty much runs away, right? A bunch of girls come over and sort of tease Morito, asking hey, can you come help us with some lawn work? I need to have a tree removed and all of this various stuff, right? And pretty much Morito's just don't treat me like that, pretty much, right? But we see the cat that was underneath the car transform into a human in the bushes, as we see this is the girl who was looking in the school window earlier, right? As we learn that this is Nemo Meow, who is a cat familiar person, and pretty much she's hey, Morito Otogi, I want you to be my familiar, pretty much, right? We then cut to, of course, Moi, Kanchi, and Nico all walking home, and really Kanchi and Nico are just, bickering about Moi being popular with the women, and it's honestly a very funny thing, just all three of them bickering, right? And eventually, Kanchi looks behind, just oh, hey, this cat's following us, and we see it's the same cat from earlier, of course, Nimue, right? And pretty much, there's this little bit of a thing where Kanchi's hey, maybe he wants to come home with us, a bunch of all this various stuff, right? And a lot of it is based on Nimue in her cat form, just losing her cool seeing all of this. And she pretty much is hey, I heard this witch Nico made Morito her familiar. And hey, he's an ogre. That's absolutely insane. It's she had a cheat code or something to do all of this, right? And of course, as we know, hey, Nico also has the crow familiar of Kanchi now. But it's a little bit of an interesting thing. And Nimue's wow, he's just so cool. And hey, I really want him as my familiar, but I'm way too nervous just to talk to him outright, right? Well, there's a little bit of a fun joke wherever Nimu's been mowing this entire time and actually follows the group home, right? And as they get to, of course, the Odigi house, Nimu is just invited inside and she's just sitting on the couch pretty much, right? Kanchi sort of is on the floor with Nico. We see that he has this new blind bag game called the March of Progress human figures pretty much, right? And he's pretty much just trying to collect the entire March of Progress here, right? This may or may not come up later, right? Well, eventually Nico comes over, tries to pet the cat, who is Nimu. Nimu isn't very happy about this, runs over the entire room. Kanji tries to pet it, and eventually she ends up in Morito's lap on accident, right? Well, of course, being that Morito is, of course, a proper human being, he is a cat lover. If you aren't a cat lover, I can't trust you, if you know what I'm saying, right? But it's a little bit of a fun thing is like, she's like, oh man, how could I ever try to escape this guy's hands, right? She pretty much was like a lot of like sexual innuendos pretty much, where she's like, man, it's almost like he's just pressing me up against a wall, begging to ask me out. Like, oh no, he's like just petting me on the, it's all this very honestly a little bit of a weird stuff, but just like all of Nimu's fantasies when it's not that big whatsoever, right? And we even see that she sort of makes this poem in her mind called Embraced by an Ogre's Hand. And we see she's like getting very much in arms about all of this, right? And at this point, she starts to fall asleep, right? And as she starts to fall asleep, we actually get the opening theme playing over the end of the episode, which is one of my favorite tropes in anime. I love whenever the opening theme or even the ending theme just like plays over. But of course, the ending theme is Maho Spice by Ao. And it's pretty much playing over the rest of this episode's contents pretty much, right? As Nimu is almost falling asleep, right? But then we learn that if she falls asleep, her transformation magic will be broken and that she'll transform into a human right in Morito's lap, pretty much, right? And she's trying to fight the urge to fall asleep, but honestly, can she? And eventually, she ends up falling asleep on the couch and transforming back into a human. And it's at this point where Kanchi just yells out like, oh, look at that, it's a human. And Nimu is like suddenly startled awake like, oh no, they found me out. As we see that Kanchi's really just talking like, oh my gosh, I finally got the human figure in the March of Progress figure line. Like I now have all of them. And we see that like he's lining up all of the figures. And Nimu sort of takes this moment to escape out as Morito sort of entranced up over with him. Of course, he took the cat out of his lap and sat down to sort of look at all of this various stuff. A few jokes about Kanji, of course, like, hey, don't be spending money you don't have, pretty much, and all of that various stuff, right? And eventually they all turn around, hey, where did the kitty go, right? As we then see that Morito's like, hey, I'm sure that cat will be back sometime in the future. And we even see that Nimu on her way back home just says like, hey, I may live a town over pretty much, but I am going to return and try to get Morito as my familiar. And that's where we end this episode of Witch Watch. Of course, we then get the next episode preview where we get the next episode title, which is Under the Lover's Tree. And I am almost certain that one is correct this time around, right? But honestly, just a really good episode of Witch Watch through and through. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, of course, with how this episode treats all of the chapters and everything, it goes through the beats of chapter 13, the beats of chapter 14, and the beats of chapter 15 all in order. So really nothing really major to talk about the anime changes, besides for the fact of, hey, where did chapter number 12 go? Honestly, chapter number 12 isn't one of my favorite chapters in the Witch Watch manga, so if it doesn't get animated, I'm not going to be disappointed at it whatsoever. I mean, back in the day, whenever I started reading Witch Watch, I read it weekly up until about, I think, I read the 12th chapter, and then I read the 13th chapter, and I'm like, you know what, this just isn't as funny as I think it should be, and I did drop it until I saw some post on, I think, Twitter, or I guess what's now known as X, but it was Twitter back in the day, somebody saying like, hey, Witch Watch was really, really good this week, I should start reading, and I was like, you know, maybe I should start reading again. I really loved Oscar Lost in Space, which was Kento Shinohara's previous work, so I'm like, hey, let me go check it out again, and I got caught back up on, like, those 5 chapters in between to, like, chapter, I think it was 16 is when, or no, it was chapter 17, whenever the Under the Lover's Tree arc ends, and since then, I've, of course, been reading it weekly, but, hey, fun fact, there's a period of, like, 5 chapters there where I wasn't reading Witch Watch weekly, and this was one of those, so yeah, it's a good episode in general. Thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Witch Watch episode number 5. Of course, I'll be back next time talking about Witch Watch episode number 6. But hey, if you enjoyed this video, I do plenty of other anime and manga related content here on the YouTube channel, so go check that out if you will. I think it's a pretty good time, if you know what I'm saying. There will be a playlist with the other Witch Watch episodes reviews in the description box of this video and also on the end card. Hey, if you want to see some more of these in the future, I know we don't ask for this, but hey, subscribe to the channel. It's just a cool thing you can do, you know? But hey, if you don't think I've earned your subscription, then please don't wait till I've earned it, at least, so you don't unsubscribe here in like a few weeks and I'm like, damn, I'm sad, my number went down after that, right? But either way, again, thank you guys for watching this video and Which Watch episode number 5. Of course, this episode was titled My Student is My Favorite Artist, My Tummy is Tender Today, and Cat Scout. Of course, the original manga is by Kento Shinohara, and the anime adaptation is produced by Bilberry Animation Studios. And this episode covered chapter numbers 13 through 15. And hey, I'll catch you guys next time, and this will be Glowplasma 231 signing out. I really like Nimu's character. I think she's a pretty cool one. Of course, I've been reading the manga for 200 chapters, so I've got to like her at some point, but I think Nico's pretty, or not Nico, Nimu's pretty cool. I also think Nico's pretty cool. I think all of the characters in this series are honestly pretty good. Maybe except for like Kawashihara, I don't think he ever shows up again. But yeah, fall out of the way. I'll catch you guys next time. Glowplasma out.